Hey everybody, what's it, Fox Gaming here. I've got a brand new build video for you today. This is actually an updated build from my original Pestilence Solo Heroic content build. So I've made some changes to this based on some damage testing, and I feel that this has reached its final form. For those of you that are new to the channel that maybe haven't seen the original video, you don't know of my love for Pestilence, I still to this day believe that it is the single best weapon in the game for soloing heroic content. And I feel that the only build that can really deal with that content, at least solo, better is my skill build that utilises a striker turret. No wait, a striker and assault. I always get confused as to which one is which, but the assault and the assault turret and the striker drone, or maybe the other way around. I'm not sure. I will link that build in the description though, because it is really good. This is just more if you want to actually shoot things in the face and be a little bit more engaged in what you're doing. So if you're interested in hitting up legendary content, running heroic content with groups, or just solo heroic content, you know, control points and whatnot, this is the build for you. So first of all, Pestilence. I'm sure most of you know what this does, but just to quickly reiterate, the talent applies a debuff. So Plague of the Outcast applies a debuff dealing 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds, and this stacks up to 50 times. Whenever an enemy dies with this debuff, all stacks are transferred to nearby enemies within 25 meters. So pretty straightforward. Shoot something. See that debuff applying, spreads over there, 10 seconds drops down, you can top it back up just by shooting it. Yeah, easy as that. So it's the reason I like this gun, and the reason I think it's best for solo content, is it applies damage in two ways, and it's one of the few weapons in the game that does that, if not the only weapon in the game that does that. So you've got your bullet damage, what I'll now refer to as dot damage. Dot is simply damage over time, and that's in this case the Plague of the Outcasts debuff. So the reason that Pestilence is king for me at the moment, and to be fair it was before its sleeper buff, is it did get some... They basically didn't describe it very well in the patch notes for TU10, but it got some really nice little buffs that completely fixed Plague of the Outcasts, as it never used to work very well. First of all, what used to happen is if you had a debuff applied to an enemy and another player shot that enemy with a different type of weapon, so a non-pestilence weapon, like an M1A, it cancelled the stacks and it would not transfer. That's been eradicated, so now basically the stacks will always transfer if their enemy dies, regardless of how they die, which is fantastic news. What plays out well into that is that the stacks now correctly add up. So before with Pestilence, let's say you'd applied, I don't know, 5 stacks to this guy with low health, and you'd already got like 30 or 40 on this gold bar here. This guy is going to die first, right? His 5 stacks would transfer over to the gold and replace every single stack that you built up, and it'd just have 5 again. It was very sporadic, it didn't work very well at all. What it now does is correctly add up all of the stack damage. So if his 5 stacks die and he's up to 30, he just straight away goes up to 35, and it instantly refreshes the 10-second timer as well. So if you're in the middle of reloading and his 10 seconds is about to run out, but this purple guy dies, not only will it reset the 10 seconds on the gold, but it will also add on top of his existing stacks the extra 5. So it's fantastic. You'll hit your 50 stacks in no time at all, and it spreads around the room like wildfire. The final buff that they gave to Pestilence is it now correctly applies the buff to mechanical targets. I always thought this was just a feature of the gun before, that it didn't work on mechanical targets because it is a poison bullet. And even that used to transfer to them, you couldn't build them up on a mechanical target, but now you can. If there is a dog, a mechanical warhound, a turret, a drone, a seeker, a hive, a healing station, anything that's mechanical, you can fire into it, build up stacks, and when that item dies, that mechanical item, it transfers those over to the next player, target, whatever. So some really nice buff to Pestilence that make it fantastic for group play because it does massive damage, and obviously solo play because it does all the damage in the background even whilst you're sat in cover reloading your gun and healing up and whatever else. So what I've done to improve this build, I wanted to essentially focus on buffing both types of damage from Pestilence, so the actual bullet damage and the dot damage, as much as humanly possible. And if you look at the Plague of the Outcasts there, the description, the bit in orange states that it's 100% of your weapon damage, and that's how they calculate the dot damage. So you see my total damage here is 112.1k. That's not entirely true. It is also buffed by 3 other stats: damage to armor, damage to health, and damage to targets out of cover. So what we've done is replaced my old version of this build, which was 3-piece Providence, with a load of pieces that spec into those 3 stats as well as weapon damage. So the 4 different stats that buff both bullet and dot damage of Pestilence we've spec'd heavily into in this build, and that means that our damage is massively shot up. Providence that I used to use before is pretty much the staple of any DPS set. Gives you headshot damage, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage. But none of those three things buff the dot damage of Pestilence, only the bullet damage. So I'm only buffing half of the weapon's potential. Now I'm buffing, well, 100% of the weapon's potential. So let's see how I've done that. What we've done to replace Providence is get in some Walker Harris & Co. One piece gives us 5% weapon damage, 2 piece gives us 5% damage to armor, 3 piece gives us 5% damage to health. Now, for those that are a little bit unsure of the difference between damage to health and armor, I know a lot of you would already know this, but I've got to cater for everybody. The main confusion comes around heavies, so the big Black Tusk heavies and the Warhounds. You know, the massive guys that have armor plating that you have to break through first in order to damage their health. They are not classed as damage to armor. There's one simple way to tell. It will either have just a continuous coloured bar like you see here, that purple or that red, that is damage to health. They have the white segments above, that is damage to armour. You will always damage their armour first unless you blow up a poison barrel, which are only on certain missions, so just bear that in mind. If you're up against a heavy and you haven't got any damage to health, you're going to be doing minimal damage. If you've got a lot of damage to health, you'll be doing a lot more damage, even though they've got armour plating. So it's a little bit confusing, but just that's essentially what you're looking out for. Do they have the white segments above their health bar, or do they just have the health bar? Luckily, Walker and Harris buffs both of those anyway, so that's not too bad. So we've gone for 3 pieces of Walker and Harris. What we're doing as well is going for 3 named items to further buff those 3 additional stats to help out our Pestilence damage. One is the Hollow Man, which is the named Jarl mask that is only available from the Dark Zone or PvP caches, so from DZ or Conflict. This gives us 10% health damage, as you can see here. All 6 of these pieces are of course spec'd into weapon damage as a core attribute because we're focusing purely on Pestilence. The second piece is the named Petrov gloves, which is great because they give us LMG damage anyway, and that's exactly what we're using. You'll see on the attribute there that they're giving us 8% damage to armor. And then finally we have the named Overlord knees, the Fox's Prayer, which give us 8% damage to targets out of cover. Now, being an LMG, it's one of only 2 weapons in the game that already comes with both damage to armor and damage to targets out of cover. The only other way you can get this is with shotguns, so just bear that in mind. So it's good that we can stack those up. And that means that even though, yeah, I've rolled a lot of these pieces into critical hit chance, critical hit damage, as you can see, that's not that important on this build because it doesn't buff the dot, it only buffs the bullet damage. We're still at 46 and nearly 47% critical hit chance, so if somebody's wearing a Coyotes in our team, we're going to be close to the cap anyway. But the main thing here is the 19% damage to armor, the 15% damage to health, and for some reason it doesn't show it, but we do have 20% damage to targets out of cover. So that's 8% from the Foxes, 12% from the Pestilence. So that's essentially what we're doing to buff all of our damage. I'm still running Gunner. I'll quickly show you why that is. Gunner is the best, really the only one you should be running with LMGs anyway, but there are a few reasons that it's the right choice. What I'll do after this is I'll quickly load into a mission and just show you the damage. So 10% armor, this is the main one for me, or one of 2 main ones. Every enemy we kill gives us 10% armor. And this is whether it's from the dot or your bullets, so that's great. It's a great way of keeping yourself alive. You can run this with a fixer drone as well. It doesn't really make a difference, but it's just one more way to get your health back. 2, we have the every third reload is 50% faster, which helps out with our LMG. This is a nice one as well. 10% of your total ammo capacity is given back to you every 60 seconds, which is really good with an LMG because they are a bit of a bullet hose. We also get the increased rate of fire. Pesty dot stacks are applied whenever a bullet hits an enemy, so the faster you're firing your gun, the more stacks are applied in a smaller window, so the rate of fire actually plays really well into our build. And we also have the 10% weapon handling whilst we're not in cover. The reason that's really important as well is the talents that we're running. So again, if you watch my previous version of this video, it's the same talents, you'll know exactly what these are, but for the newcomers here, I run Braced. While in cover, weapon handling is increased by 45%, and I run Composure, which stacks really well with it as well. While in cover, increases total weapon damage by 15%. So, you know, there will be a few of you here that are wondering why I'm not running a damage talent here, as the whole point of this build is to do as much damage as possible. What Braced essentially does is it completely removes all of the weaknesses of Pestilence whilst retaining all of its strengths. So for those of you that use LMGs, know that its main weaknesses are its handling. They have poor accuracy, terrible stability, they're all over the place. And secondly, its reload speed. Brace completely removes both of those weaknesses and makes it reload incredibly fast and shoot like a laser. So we are indirectly buffing our DPS, even though we don't have a DPS talent on our chest, because one, you see how tight that reticle is compared to when you stood up, or you just don't have braced active. And I'm not even going to control the recoil here. It fires like an absolute laser. So you are buffing your DPS by, one, reloading 45% faster. You see how quick that is, it's absolutely rapid. Of course, the less time you spend reloading, the more damage you're doing, and the more stacks you're applying. And two, because it is so accurate, we can hit targets at severe range and still absolutely drop them. So less missed bullets and less reload time means more damage. So Braced is a DPS buff. It is. I don't care what anyone says. I know it doesn't say it there, but you are buffing your DPS over time because you're not missing as much. Composure, you could swap this out if you really wanted. Companion also gives 15% if you've got a fixer drone with you. That's a really good choice, and then you don't need to be in cover. But as we're in cover, I just wanted Composure. I didn't want Vigilance because whilst it offers more damage, in solo play in particular, you lose it all the time. You're the only target to be hit. So that was my choice of talents there. I think Braced is a must for this build. Your backpack you can afford to swap out though. Okay, let's do a... I'm only going to clear like one room of this mission. I'm not going to do anything too. I don't want to take you all through an entire mission, but just to give you an idea of how to play the build, and you know, you can see some of the damage that it can output. We'll play it on heroic.
You're going to need to get the access codes to the vault to...
So yeah, this is my absolute favourite build. I use this all the time. It's really easy because you haven't got to be constantly out of cover landing your M1A headshots. You can just be in cover and let the dot damage do half the work for you. And the good thing as well with Braced is you can hit their weak points really easily. So if he dies, that's going to actually pass through his turret now. The weak point here. So all of these now, the first one of these to die, will just pass it and correctly stack it to whichever the closest enemy is. I can't actually see what I'm shooting at here. And my health is just constantly going up when these guys die. There you go, that's correctly transferred there. Unlucky to be you, dude. Look at that, 600,000 per tick. It's crazy damage. You can hit over 1 million a tick. One of my subscribers mentioned he runs a similar version of this build, but with Glass Cannon and Vigilance, so he's a braver man than I am. That hits over 1 million a tick. With this build at max stacks, it's about 850k, which is huge. That's still massive damage. You just have the, you don't have the danger of running Glass Cannon. As much as I do think Glass Cannon is one of the best talents in the game for damage, it's difficult to play. One thing can kill you that you're not expecting. And ultimately, being a solo build, I wasn't looking for that. That's why I run the decoy and the res hive. I feel like I don't need the heals because everything that dies gives me 10% of my armor. Yeah, so I mean, I barely did anything to this room and it's already cleared out. It's so efficient. It's really, really easy to apply that damage without having to have the greatest aim. And Brace just helps out if you don't have the greatest sort of recoil, control, or aim. I play on Xbox. That's a bit of an issue for me. Brace removes that problem. So I'm not going to go any further into the mission. That's the, all I wanted to explain about the updated build there. Screenshot it if you want to. If you have a similar build that you like or anything you prefer to see replaced here, please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear if there are any variants of this build. I'm glad that a lot of my subscribers actually agree with my choice of Braced. I know people I've spoken to in the past didn't agree with it. But that's the beauty of this build. If you don't want it, swap it out. Guarantee though, if you haven't used it before and you try it out, you'll fall in love with it. It's really, really strong. So that's the end of the video. Thank you very much if you did stay through to the end. I will see you all in the next video, which will probably be tomorrow, possibly the day after, when I'm going to be releasing some clan details. We're starting up a new clan on Xbox and I want to get some of you guys in there. We'll have some fun. We'll get the Discord server set up. That'll probably be tomorrow. Until then, have a great weekend. And as I said, see you all in the next video.